So, hello everyone, this is OK here, and what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be reading Tal-Botvinnik, 1960, about the World Championship match that took place in 1960 between Mikhail Tal and Botvinnik. And just to read, the motivation was because Yasser Seirawan was once asked which chess book he recommended. And first on his list was this book, Tal-Botvinnik 1960, which is an annotation by Tal himself of the games from his World Championship match. And the position you see in front of you is the position in Game 1, in which Tal had achieved a positional advantage. So although he's only a pawn up, already he's got a positional advantage, and he went on to convert Game 1, which set the tone for the match. So just to read from the blurb at the back. So Andy Soltis, International Grandmaster, says, Mikhail Tal's splendid account of his World Championship match victory is one of the masterpieces of the golden age of annotation, before insights and feelings and flashes of genius were reduced to mere moves and informant symbols. This is simply the best book written about a World Championship match by a contestant. That shouldn't be a surprise, because Tal was the finest writer to become world champion. So yeah, so I never knew that Tal was a writer. So and then in 1960 says some other commentator, Mikhail Botvinnik was the pillar of scientific chess and the iron-willed champion of the world. The young attacking genius Mikhail Tal, so they're both Mikhails, the Wizard of Riga, put the magic back into the game by defeating Botvinnik with spectacular tactics in one of the most dramatic and celebrated World Championship matches of all time. But let's get straight to it. Although let's read the preface first. So, and people will probably still be joining us as we start. So we're first going to read what Tal said in the preface, and then we'll turn to Game 1. So he says, in the spring of 1960, two Soviet chess players again met each other in the match for the championship of the world. This time I played the role of challenger. I will not hide the fact that it was very flattering that the World Championship match between Botvinnik and me aroused great interest among chess players. All the match games were analysed in detail in the pages of the press. Grandmaster Ragozin headed the remarkable analysts who, soon after the finish of the duel, published books about the match. To add something to their variations is a problem which is by no means easy. But this author, i.e. Tal himself, has not tried to do that. His goal was not to discover some move in the struggle through the eyes of a detached spectator, but to try to give the personal feelings, thoughts, agitation, and disappointments of a direct participant in the combat. Let the reader not complain that in this book he will not see Tal, figuratively speaking, in a starched white shirt and tie, but in his working clothes. I will relate the story of the match, basically from the beginning of this intense duel. Of course, such a book might be, to a certain extent, one-sided. I therefore place before myself one goal: to reveal to the reader, in detail, the dialectical developmental process of a chess game, beginning with the opening. A book this size does not permit me to give an opening manual, and in fact such would be beyond the scope of this endeavour. Each game is prefaced with a small introduction in which I discuss the attitude before the game, or go in for a small lyrical digression, sharing my thoughts that I had at the time of the match. Hi there, Ryusai 8000 in chat. So then we start with before the match itself, where he will explain the struggles he had because he first had to qualify. And this position is from Game 1, and I think I should have put it on this position. Queen d1, he was very proud of this move. Before the match. The cherished dream of every chess player is to play a match with the world champion. But here is the paradox. The closer you come to the realization of this goal, the less you think about it. At the very beginning of my creative path, I mentally depicted my meeting with Botvinnik more than once. Botvinnik, the hero of our generation, on whose games and labours more than one pleiad of Soviet chess players has been nurtured. Later this goal became less of a dream as I became a member of the large group of participants who were to play a series of tournaments leading to the right to play a match with the world champion. However, current affairs somehow pushed these sweet dreams into the background. Curiously enough, at the time of the candidates' tournament, I did not find myself once dreaming those dreams which until recently had seemed so forbidden. But the tournament ended, I had succeeded in taking first place, and had earned the right to play the match. It then would seem that there was not a minute to lose before preparations for the match should begin. Far from it. My nervous reaction after that marathon tournament had been so great that I was in no condition to think about the match, or for that matter, any serious chess work. And there was not much time before the beginning of the match, less than 6 months. Rather than venturing it myself, Alexander Koblenz and I began the business of discussing the problems of preparation for the most important event in my life. Until that time, I had considered myself, and not without reason, among the ranks of tournament chess players. I had only had one occasion to play an actual match. That was in 1954, when I, to tell the truth, really did not imagine that it was necessary to prepare for such a contest. Therefore, I was completely unfamiliar with the specific character of this type of competition. Nevertheless, there exists a huge difference between tournament and match play. First of all, to express it coarsely, there is the bookkeeping. While in a tournament, a participant is not bound by his point showing, at least in the first part of the tournament, and can venture the luxury of staying up late at the start, each match game is equally important. You see, in a match, there are no other competitors, no outsiders, and a chess player cannot plan in advance from whom he will win without fail, with whom a draw will be sufficient, and, as often happens, to whom it will not be shameful to lose. The cost of each point in a match, in comparison with a tournament game, grows twofold. If one chess player wins, then his rival automatically loses, and therefore match games always evoke a greater feeling of responsibility. Matches have their own psychological character. If in the candidates tournament I became weary meeting one and the same opponent 4 times, and this was after an interval of 7 rounds, then what is to be said about a match in which I would meet the same chess player day in and day out? This is even more taxing. Finally, the problem of preparing for a match is also significantly more difficult. I have not yet mentioned that my opponent was an unsurpassed master of home preparation. If I often employed risky variations, it may have worked out in a tournament. If I put my hopes on some risky opening adventure in a match, my bluff was certain to be called. In a word, I had comparatively little time in which to study the ABCs of match play, while my opponent in the last 10 years had defended his championship dissertation only in this milieu. And actually, when we began to go over games played by Botvinnik since he had won the title of world champion in 1948, it did not take much time to convince us that the overwhelming majority of them were played in title matches, in which he had 3 times defended his title and once recovered it. I was often chided for the fact that only 1 month after the conclusion of the candidates tournament, I entered the first international tournament at Riga, and it was extremely unimportant. Here I must frankly admit that this appearance was also one of the ingredients of my preparation for the match. Chess fans probably focus their attention on the fact that in the majority of my games in this tournament, I turned out to be on the defensive, sometimes right from the opening. Inasmuch as defense has always been my Achilles heel, I did not treat it lightly. In all fairness, it must be noted that the pace was set by the 2 winners of the tournament, Boris Spassky and Vladas Mikenas. Their results at the end were so impressive that I, at no time in this competition, saw any possibility of being their equal. However, be that as it may, my trainer and I were fairly satisfied with the creative results of the tournament. And besides, this small, pleasant tournament in Riga, in my opinion, was an extremely valuable tension reliever. It is interesting to note that I felt less tired after the tournament than I did before it. At the same time, I had begun my preparation for the forthcoming match in earnest. It is customary to consider that preparation for each competition is divided into 3 elements. 1, a chess element, basically the openings. 2, a psychological element, and 3, a physical element. The analysis of innovations by Soviet and foreign theoreticians enters into the first element, a new search, a better continuation in this or that opening variation. The psychological element includes primarily a detailed analysis of the games of the future opponent, full comprehension of his strengths and weaknesses, and perception of his manner, or, as is commonly called, his style of play. Physical preparation, it seems to me, lies not solely in the realm of chess, but we gave fundamental consideration to physical preparation that would give me better chances of having a fresh mind in such a tiring match, rather than generating 2 suitcases of theoretical novelties. Oh yes, I just see Risai 8000 in Twitch chat says, is this story time with OK? It's story time with Mikhail Tal, but I'm just voicing, and he does write well, I have to say. Just voicing his story. Yeah. So quite interesting. He needs to understand the moves, he needs to understand the style his opponent likes, and he needs to be physically fit. However, due to general fatigue, it turned out that I was not in any condition to sharpen any opening edges anyway. Therefore, we did not spend too much time preparing the openings. Chess players always say that, though. I understandably felt during the match that I could not be satisfied with my results in the initial stages in many games, but there were also advantages from the outset of the first game. I felt hungry for chess, and what is even more important, right at the beginning of the 21st game, I never felt too full, in quotations. Nevertheless, of course, we spent a considerable amount of time over the chessboard. As far as the openings were concerned, our basic problem was to find our own level, so that I would be spared from having to, quote, reinvent the wheel during the match. Basically, it did not seem necessary to us that my opening repertoire had to be changed. First of all, I had tried the possibility of varying openings in tournaments, especially with white, and also in defense to 1d4. In any case, we examined several systems, except for the Sicilian, which I almost always use in answer to e4. I say in any case because Botvinnik in his preceding matches had not opened once with his e-pawn. The last time in any competition for the World Championship that he did so was in a game with Reshevsky in 1948, after he had already secured first place. And in the tournaments in which Botvinnik had occasionally participated, he as a rule played d4 or c4 on the first move, venturing one e4 only with those opponents who seemed to be relatively weaker. And a sharp reorganization actually cannot help in the course of a struggle, since it is understood that it takes a while to become accustomed to positions encountered for the first time in tournament practice. So there they were, our opening plans. For black, to perfect the systems formerly employed by me in closed openings, and for white, basically to examine the variations employed by Botvinnik in answer to 1e4, which I intended to play from the very beginning. We focused most of our attention in analysing the games of Botvinnik. I will not hide the fact that this was not an easy task. First of all, it was not easy because the majority of the world champions' games were already well known, and the quality of play, the harmony of logical conceptions, the strict consistency in the realization of a plan, the ability to impose his style of play on his opponent, the irreproachable endgame technique, this was also quite familiar to us. So I should say we're very soon going to get to game 1, but we're just quickly giving the introduction. Botvinnik's rare entrance into competitions recently also played a role. It is true that, as a rule, these appearances were rather successful. In the last 5 years, Botvinnik, except for his World Championship matches, had participated in the Olympiads in Amsterdam, Moscow and Munich, where he attained good results, losing only one game. To his credit, the world champion did share first place in the Moscow International and won a small tournament in Holland. He likewise had participated in the People's Spartakiad of the USSR. That probably was all. On the basis of these games, it was necessary to come to a conclusion about the contemporary Botvinnik. We were convinced that my future opponent had not recently gone in for any voluntary intensification of a struggle, and in those cases when he was caught up in a combinational storm, he was less sure of himself. If he obtained a position in the opening in which he had the initiative, then his opponent, under pressure, could only hope for a miracle, and this occurred very, very rarely. The discovery was made that in many games, Botvinnik would agree to a minimal edge in the endgame, which, as a rule, would lead to success, thanks to his highly polished technique. But the most important conclusion at which we arrived in examining all of his games might have been that during a game, Botvinnik gives most of his consideration to strategic questions, not being distracted by different tactical variations. This can be both a plus, consistency in the realization of a plan, and a minus, since in several positions his underestimation of the tactics showed considerably in his results. For example, in several games in his match with Vasily Smyslov, in particular in the 8th game of the 1957 match, and the 11th and 22nd games of the return match. And it's also seen in Botvinnik-Gurgenidze in the People's Second Spartakiad of the USSR, when though Botvinnik had restricted his opponent according to all rules of chess strategy, he was not able to realize the advantage which he had obtained. All that had been required was some sharp tactical play. In this respect, his games with foreign chess players seemed less significant, since in many of the encounters where he had strategic superiority, this was fully sufficient to bring home the full point. These were then probably all the conclusions which we were able to draw from the World Champions Games. We drew some interesting conclusions from statistics. In particular, Botvinnik had lost only 2 games in tournament play since 1956. To Paul Keres in the Alekhine International Memorial Tournament and to Dirkstein in the 13th Chess Olympiad, both games in which Botvinnik had black unfurled under the banner of the Sicilian. Further, in several other games played with the Sicilian, Botvinnik's position was not too favourable for a long time. One might recall his meeting with Bent Larsen at the 12th Chess Olympiad in Moscow. Botvinnik had achieved most of his success employing the Caro-Kann defence when he had black, although this defence, it is true, had only undergone trial in one competition, the return match with Smyslov, while the appearance of the French defence in Botvinnik's games was becoming rarer and rarer in recent years. Only in Munich against Wolfgang Ullmann did Botvinnik answer 1d4 with 1e6, and then it can be assumed that the German Grandmaster, then still a master, refrained from 2e4, as he himself usually played the French. We did not find one game in which Botvinnik played white against the King's Indian when he faced 2c5. It was not clear which system Botvinnik would use in reply to the King's Indian defence, since in his games the solid fianchetto of the King's bishop had been most encountered, as well as the recently fashionable Samish attack. The small number of games played by Botvinnik could not give us satisfactory answers to our many interesting questions. In short, the preparation for the match was a preparation with many unknowns, and only the match itself would give the answers to all the questions. March 1960 imperceptibly approached. Further events developed rapidly. The arrival in Moscow in the evening, the drawing of lots, the result of which was that I would have white in the first game. The next day, the match's opening ceremonies, and then, March the 15th, the first round. And so finally, we turn to game 1. And I have to thank someone else for putting all these games in a study. Actually, only the first 6 games so far. And that person is J. Jeremy 77. He put the first 6 games in, so I'm not sure how far we'll get with this book. I mean, It would be lovely to be able to read the whole book one day on stream, but we'll see how far we go. And Jeremy says, Vaya con Dios, my chess friends. This study will be about the 1960 World Championship match between the legends Mikhail Tal and Mikhail Botvinnik. And we're reading from Tal's perspective. So we will include variations that Tal believed were relevant and a few quotations. Okay, so game 1, Tuesday, March the 15th. And he has just a quick introduction before game 1. I must confess to the readers that my spirits right up until the beginning of the match were not too high. And there was a good reason for this. In the past few years, I had had the charming habit of beginning a tournament with a defeat. The 25th Championship of the Soviet Union, the International Tournament in Zurich, the USSR's People's Spartakiad, and finally the Candidates Tournament. This list seems to me to be quite sufficient. This had gotten into my flesh and blood to such a degree that the score of the first game would come as no surprise to me, to my opponent, or to my chess friends, who would not begin to look for chess releases or buy the bulletins until the second round. Oh, I see. It is true that I succeeded in winning the first game against Grandmaster Tolush in the first international tournament in Riga at the end of 1959, but as it turned out, the winning of this first game was virtually unique for me in competition. The problem of beginning the first game of the match had not been considered by us. Even in the closing ceremonies at the Candidates Tournament in Belgrade, a Yugoslav radio commentator asked me, "What will you play on the first move as white in the first game of your match with Botvinnik?" I promised without much reflection to begin the game by advancing my e-pawn, and I did not want to break my word for no reason whatsoever. That notwithstanding, the move e4 is not so bad itself. So what does he play as move 1 in game 1? e4. And Botvinnik already threw him a surprise. e6, which, as we heard in the introduction, he was using less and less. Is this a surprise? Not as far as I am concerned. At least, preparing for the match, my trainer Alexander Koblenz and I realized that his use of the French defense was a real possibility. Although this opening did not bring Botvinnik any special success, in his second match with Smyslov, Botvinnik's exceptional creative ability did not provide any basis for assuming that he would shy away from that very French defence, which so many times had brought him outstanding victories. The most recent of the French games, which was of theoretical significance, had been played between Gligorich and Petrosian in the 1959 Candidates Tournament, and in that game the opening had turned out well for white. We had, of course, studied this game, and were not opposed to a repetition of the opening moves. Inasmuch as it was obvious that Botvinnik had also examined this game, the match took on a very peculiar psychological aspect regarding the openings from the very first meeting. Before my second move, I reflected for a minute, recalling the numerous ramifications of this opening, considering those upon which my opponent might also dwell. And Tal played d4. Not surprisingly, Botvinnik played d5. And now he has a choice between the advanced variation, pushing his pawn, classical variation, Tal played knight c3. And in response, Botvinnik put his bishop out to b4. So implicitly the threat is on this pawn, although taking this pawn is not so pretty because you get double pawns, but it is a free pawn. The French defense is one of the most complicated openings. For a long time it was thought that one had to go through a lengthy maneuvering struggle, avoiding immediate skirmishes. Through the efforts of Soviet theoreticians, Rauser for white and Botvinnik for black, ways of greatly intensifying the position were found. In the variation employed by Botvinnik in this game, black gives up his black squared bishop, which significantly weakens his king side. So this bishop is going to exchange here, creating double pawns and pressure on the center. As compensation, he is able to put pressure on white's rather compromised queen side. Many games which have begun with this variation have proven that if white does not succeed in quickly developing an initiative, the weaknesses in his position will sooner or later make themselves felt. Precisely because of this, white should immediately attempt to force the issue so as to prevent the stabilization of his opponent's position. So we saw e5 played in the game, because there's pressure on that e-pawn, so the e-pawn dodges the pressure, and c5. And often we see in the French defense lots of pressure brought to bear now on the d4 square. But a way of relieving this pressure is to get rid of this dark squared bishop. a3, and the bishop can't back off because otherwise you could take this pawn and then play b4 perhaps, I would imagine. If bishop a5, there's b4. He will actually say something about this, so I can just follow the Tal's comments himself. So Botvinnik plays the classical line of the winnower, bishop takes knight and pawn takes bishop. But just to say something, Botvinnik chooses a favourite line, bishop takes c3. It is curious to note that in the 1954 match with Smyslov, he retreated the bishop to a5 in several games. Grandmaster Smyslov does not like long variations in the opening. After the moves b4, c takes d4 in the first 3 games. So bishop a5, b4, c takes d4. He continued knight b5, looking for quiet play to take advantage of the active position of his pieces. One must think that Botvinnik considered this variation fully acceptable for black, since in the 9th game of the same match, he again continued bishop a5. So he was quite happy with knight b5 as a move. I had to look at the opening explorer just to see how white does. But this time, after home preparation, Smyslov chose the sharper continuation, queen g4. So white does okay, but black also does okay with bishop c7. So just backing off the bishop. So knight b5 is popular, but maybe not the strongest move. Queen g4 was Smyslov's home preparation, and it does well for white. So this is a variation of the French I had not actually seen before, this backing off the bishop. And after knight e7, so this is going to get quite sharp, knight e7. B takes a5, we win the bishop, and d takes c3, we lose our knight. We then take on g7, rook g8, we can pick up another pawn, at the risk of our queen being a little bit, maybe a little bit offside. Knight to d7. And it says knight to d7 is much more active than knight b to c6. Knight f3, knight f8, kicking that queen, queen d3, queen takes a5, and h4, exclamation mark. And that h-pawn is hoping to promote one day with the rook behind it. So in that game, Smyslov obtained a significant edge and won the game nicely. Botvinnik employed this same variation in his game with Unzicker, Chess Olympiad 1954. This time, it is true, he did not waste pawns on the king side, but preferred the more careful, on move 7, king f8. So after queen g4, king f8. And Rusai says Smyslov usually toasted Botvinnik in this bishop a5 variation. Yeah, this is what Tal is implying. But in this encounter, an unimportant position as far as the opening is concerned was reached. Apparently precisely because of queen g4, Botvinnik refrains from bishop a5, although even here the last word has yet to be spoken. So white does okay, even after king f8. The game Matanovic-Mitatilu from the zonal tournament in Budapest 1960 was extremely interesting from this point of view. Notice incidentally that the move queen g4 has recently become something like white's visiting card in the French defense, in those cases when white is striving for the maximum in the opening. Yeah, but it's something quite rarely seen, I would say, this bishop a5 move, and probably at the highest level because of these queen g4 ideas. Takes, and queen g4 idea. So bishop a4 takes. So really queen g4 should be promoted as a nicer response. Yeah. Okay. So Botvinnik was slightly concerned, and so he plays the classical line, which is bishop takes c3. B takes c3, and we have the famous Winawer opening, which I'm very familiar with as black, because I often play the French defense. Queen c7, and one of my teammates in Lichess 45 got done by this move, because after some kind of exchange of pawns on d4, he'd done a queen g4 move, and he thought the threat was on c2, but he missed also there's a threat on c3 with a fork of the rook. So queen c7 has attacking intentions, but as Tal will go on to say, it also has defensive ideas. There is a curious story connected with this move, queen c7. The variation knight e7 looks more flexible, knight e7. Since the king's knight still has to be developed this way, while the black queen can, on occasion, occupy a5 and later a4. This is a very well-known pattern. But the patent continuation queen g4 again causes complications, upon which chess theory has not yet given its final judgment. If memory does not fail me, Botvinnik last played knight e7 in a game with Alexander. The English master continued queen g4, c takes d4, queen takes g7, rook g8, queen takes h7, queen a5, rook b1. And after a complicated struggle, he won the game. Subsequently, Grandmaster Yefim Geller suggested an even stronger continuation, with 8, bishop d3. So we just backtrack, instead of queen takes g7, bishop d3. So I've never seen that idea. But my feeling about this move is we're threatening this, this, and then the other bishop coming into play here. With lots of pressure here, that's my general sense. And he used it successfully with a beautiful win over Sokolsky in the 18th USSR Championship. Recently, efforts by black advocates of this variation have indicated that one should continue with 7 castles, or 7 knight f5, to improve the defense, certainly, yeah. In this position I would never play. I would play knight e7, but at this position I would either play, indeed, knight f5 or even just castles. Castles is seemingly brave, castling straight into the storm, as it were. I think the point is that even if white, for example, were to go something like bishop h6, then I think knight f5 just protects everything and chases the bishop away. So black is okay. So, Botvinnik is trying to create play in the center immediately. So he goes queen c7. Queen goes to g4. There is nothing new under the sun, writes Tal. My opponent has repeatedly encountered this variation in his games. After knight f3, the game is sufficiently complicated, but insufficiently sharp, so the alternative is knight f3. That's another, but okay, we're going to go with queen g4. For the time being, white is threatening to annihilate the kingside. Okay, f5. So another move which I'm more familiar with here is this idea of knight e7, and you let white annihilate the kingside, and you just use the open files. Queen takes g7, rook g8, queen takes h7, c takes d4. So he says this is but a transposition of moves. Now the idea behind black's sixth move is revealed. g7 is defended. Because what we're going to see instead of knight e7, is f5. And so this is a very nice idea from Botvinnik. c7 was not just an attacking move, but also a defensive one. And Rusa 8000 says knight e7 is better, and I played knight e7 myself, queen g4 and castles, instead of queen c7. So that's exactly the line I have played in correspondence games on Lichess. I would go knight e7 and then castles. Castle into the face of the attack. Okay, so f5, very interesting. In view of the fact that the capture en passant, if you were to take this, e takes f6, knight takes f6, would only confirm the well-known thesis appearing in all texts that it is not worth developing the queen at the beginning of the game, because it will get hit with tempo. So this is an important lesson, especially for beginning players. Don't get your queen out too early, or you'll get hit with tempo. So white naturally continues, so he doesn't want to be hit with the knight, because black's then developing while hitting the queen. So white just calmly backs off. Queen g3, and then Botvinnik goes knight e7. Now that's a provocative move. With this last move, black stresses that he does not fear a capture on g7 in the least. In order to avoid this, he might have previously exchanged in the centre, with c takes d4, c takes d4, and only then continue knight e7. So needless to say, he could have gone c takes d4, c takes d4, now with a huge threat on c3, and then calmly continued knight to e7, because queen takes g7 would be a big mistake because of rook to g8. And Rusa says instead of queen g3, another option is queen h5, g6, and queen d1, which sounds like So just to finish this line, you're attacking the queen, and there's no way for the queen to defend the c3 square. So in this position, queen h5 check would have provoked g6, and then backing off you say to d1. And well, what I noticed in this position is there are a lot of dark square holes in this position, so as long as we can secure our own queenside, this also looks so, but can we? So after pawn takes pawn, do we have to take the queen? C takes d4. So if we take with the pawn, we have queen. After queen here, we still got bishop d2 actually. So the queen actually, d1 is an important square because it's defending. Yeah, so it's interesting. So if we went to h3, for example, that wouldn't really work, would it? Apparently h3 has been played, but it looks more risky. So we're defending c3, but we're not defending c2, is the concern with that move. So it seems a little more risky. So I was just considering. But for whatever reason, c takes d4, and I'm wondering queen takes c2, and that is apparently also a line on Lichess. I need to, okay, something I need to do urgently is switch this over to the master database, because maybe this is not a line that masters would play for exactly this reason. So let's switch this over to the masters database, and you'll probably get no games. Exactly. So queen h3, bad idea. And that illustrates why it's a bad idea. So queen h3 is an error. So okay, backing off, you did queen g3. Okay, knight e7, the kind of provocative move. We see this being played by Anand even in the 21st century. So, and about the queen h5, well, let's see who's played queen h5. Queen h5 has been played by Katakamsky, by Juliet Volgar, Spassky, and so on. So, queen g3, it's interesting to think we're going back almost 60 years now to this match. So knight e7, he says, I'm not scared, because we're about to say, if you did take this pawn, rook to g8, queen h7, oh, no, I meant that, sorry. What I meant to say was that if you take and take back, try to think. C takes d4, c takes d4. But yeah, now black could play knight e7. Black, what? Queen takes c2. I'm just wondering if queen takes c2 can be played here. And what would white play after queen takes c2? Apparently bishop to d2. But is that not so good? Yeah, so apparently that queen takes c2 is bad. Bishop to d2, and then we have a threat on here, but so queen comes back to c7 to defend g7, and then rook c1. I guess white gets a lot of activity from that pawn. So it's not completely obvious, but this is supposed to be very good for white. So that pawn, the c pawn, is poisoned. So this, yeah. So Tal is saying that he could have taken, takes, and then very calmly played knight e7. That was the line he was actually giving, because if takes, and then knight e7, then in that line, obviously, queen takes g7 is a mistake, because then rook g8, queen h6, queen c3 wins the rook. But white has a good move here, simply bishop to d2, defending against that fork. Castles, bishop to d3, b6, knight e2, bishop a6, and knight f4, with an unclear position which had been played by Reshevsky against Botvinnik in 1948. Yeah, after knight e7, bishop d2. Yeah. So, he goes on. Botvinnik played this himself in a game with Reshevsky in a match tournament for the World Championship in 1948. So white got a good attacking position. It is true that as the game progressed, Botvinnik succeeded in repelling the attack with accurate defense and even won the game, but nevertheless there are few people who are suited to handle such a position, since it does appear that white has a tangible positional plus. His dark squared bishop, although only operating on one diagonal, can strike dark square? Oh, white's dark squared bishop, yeah. Can strike via d2 to b4, where it will be positioned much more actively. The young talented German master Fuchs, in one of the last of the Mohicans who still defends this variation, is one of. He has used this continuation twice against Soviet chess players with Spassky in the Student World Championship at Varna in 58 and with Vasyukov in Gotha 57, but he was crushed both times in about 25 moves. I was thinking something much more trivial, which is, again, just notice queen c2, rook c1. And okay, we're not winning pieces, but we're opening up this file, which is probably helping white rather than black. So that's why I think yeah, the queen d7 is obviously a mistake. So bishop d2 is the main line. So I'll put bishop d2 as the main move here. Okay, but turning to the game, he plays knight e7 first, daring Tal to take on g7. Perhaps because he thought Tal loves aggressive chess. So it's quite psychological the way Botvinnik is playing this. He knows that Tal wants to tear up the position. So it was quite an interesting line to choose for Botvinnik in game one of a World Championship match to set the tone for the match. He knows, you want to tear up my position, well, I'm going to give you a chance, but I've prepared for it. And guess what? Tal took the bait. Queen takes g7. Smyslov, in the 14th game of his match with Botvinnik, avoided complications and played bishop d2. So he went for simply this. Black developed his forces, as in the game with Reshevsky, and he received a good position thanks to the passive position of white's queen's bishop, this one. I'm sure that if white wants, he can get an opening edge, but he should by no means pass up this kind of double-edged continuation, which always appears so basic, and more often than not, the strongest. So Mikhail Tal says, yep, I'll take the bait, and I'm going to go for this sharp position. Rook g8, so we can be sure we're in Botvinnik's prep. Queen takes h7, and c takes d4. Big threat. And here is perhaps a move that Botvinnik was not expecting. King d1. So I say, yeah, this is probably one of those highlights of this game. 20 years ago, an annotator would cringe in horror at such a move. At the very beginning of the game, The White King starts out on a journey. This eccentric continuation is seen little today. White prefers to mask his plans of the King's Knight for a while, keeping the possibility of either going to e2 or f3, while keeping the f1 a6 diagonal free. Losing the right to castle essentially has no meaning, since, first of all, his opponent is not very well developed yet, and second of all, Black's own king is uncomfortable on e8. As far as I am concerned, the only game in which I came across the move King d1, recommended, by the way, by Max Uhr, was in the above-mentioned Gligoric-Petrosian game. The Soviet Grandmaster continued with the straightforward knight b to c6. Aha, so King d1 would have been part of preparation. 12, knight f3. Knight takes e5. But after the very strong bishop g5, so bishop g5 is a very strong move, apparently, he got into difficulties. And so, yeah, we're thinking, hang on, why can't Black just take this knight and then take this bishop? And he goes on to say, from Botvinnik's steadfast analytical point of view, the possibility of strengthening Black's play must not be overlooked. So he was saying that from this analysis, White should be in a good position after King d1. So just backtracking this line, knight b to c, after King d1, knight b to c6, knight f3, knight takes e5, bishop g5. So puzzle for the audience, and I'm just trying to figure it out. Why can't Black just pinch this knight and then pinch the bishop? Let's just play it. Knight takes e5. I'm bishop b5 check. What's going on here? Nothing in Explorer. Can anyone in chat see? Let's see if we can work it out. Bishop b5 check. Okay. And what's so strong about that? Oh, so you don't want to move the king here or here, because otherwise the bishop can take the knight with tempo and then take back this knight. So, oh, I see. And if you block with the bishop, then we have checkmate. Wow. And Risk 8000. You got it. Nice. That's quite hard to spot. I hadn't seen it. I mean, I just saw it just now. So the king has to move to one of these two squares, and then you can take the knight with check and then take this knight. So you're not losing material at the very least. So bishop g5, quite a cunning move, and apparently White's got quite a nice position here. That's what he's claiming. Engine says plus 1.9 for plus 1.7 for Black. Now, if there is such a thing as bookmarks, I would definitely say this King d1 move is a bookmark position. Well, there is such a thing, is there? New tag. New tag. I'm just wondering, is there such a thing as a bookmark on Lichess? Annotator? No. New tag. Okay, so new tag. What should we call this position? Well, I'll say highlight. Does that work? Well, anyway, I'm just experimenting with the Explorer. Highlight? I don't know if it actually does anything on the PGN. I can't see an OK. Can't find it. But I want to have a kind of highlight position tag. This is a winner, Pragmax, indeed. This is game 1 of the World Championship match in 1960 between Botvinnik and Tal. Tal is white, Botvinnik is black, and we're still in home preparation, even after King D1. And just to play through the moves, just in case anyone's joining us. So we discussed how Botvinnik had sometimes tried bishop a4, which is rare. I mean, I never really studied it, but apparently it's rarely seen because of because of b4 followed by queen g4 ideas. So instead he went down the classical route. Then Botvinnik played queen c7, which is slightly unusual because knight e7 in castles is what I'm more familiar with. Queen g4, but he's in prep, and the idea is, okay, so this defending g7, white backs off, and then he's kind of tempting white. No, go on, take that pawn. And apparently this position here takes here, and the threat is queen takes c3, winning a rook. And this move, king d1, is not a novelty at that time. It had been played. I'd say. But there's one particular game in which it had been played. There's something wrong with the opening Explorer because it can't find king d1. Okay, it can find king d1. 27 games, and interesting. So what if queen takes e5, you say? So good question. What if queen takes e5? So that's never been played. So there must be. It was, yeah, king d1 was played in Grigorich Petrosian in '59, as Rusai says, and that's just the year before this match. So they both knew of that. So what is wrong with queen takes d5? Well, we can develop our knight with tempo and then take on e4. So we win back that pawn for sure. We could either take the pawn or the queen. So I think that just helps us develop with a certain tempo. And we have to remember that white is up. White is up pawn. White is up at least a pawn already. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so pawns are fairly level. Knight f3 seems more than okay. Yeah, you're winning a pawn. You're a pawn up, and you're developing quite quickly. So the problem is the queen is that pawn's quite weak, and black can exchange queens. Yeah. But then, yeah, white will be a pawn up then in that position. Okay, so the reason is, this is the deep reason why Pragmax, this isn't good. You exchange queens. Who's going to win the endgame? This. White is winning this endgame. That's the pass pawn in the position. So yeah, sure, black has this huge center, but it's all going to be about that pass pawn. So exchanging queens is not going to benefit black. And Twitch Fury asks, what do you think is the fastest way to get better at chess? I always say there are 3 things. The first, play lots, but don't just play because bullet or something. Play at a time control where you can recognize your mistakes, and so when you play the same opening line again, you then play a better move. This may mean just a time control slow enough that you can see your own mistakes, or it means after each game actually looking through the game and reviewing it. The second thing is look at games like this between two masters to just try and see their thinking processes. And the third thing, probably the most important thing at a basic level, is tactics, 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 to improve your vision of. As I said, I had a teammate in Lichess 45-45 this week who, in this kind of position, kind of basically took back this pawn, and then he'd taken back this pawn and he defended the c2 pawn, but he completely missed c3, forking the rook. So seeing tactics. Pragmatic says, I would give pass pawn against Tal instead of keeping queens in the game. Fair enough. But Tal, yeah, I'm sure Tal was good at endgames as well. So, okay, so where are we up to? But I think Botvinnik is being quite cunning here, because he knows that Tal would take on this challenge, and he had prepared this. Quite clearly he'd prepared. This is all home prep from Botvinnik. Risa says, do what AlphaZero does, play 1 million games against yourself. Yeah, but also like review the games. I mean, I really think that's... Otherwise you're just playing fast games and just repeating the same mistakes. So play lots of games, but also do like at least spend a few seconds checking, what did I do wrong this game? Otherwise we repeat the same patterns and then we don't actually get better. We just play. It might be fun, but we're not recognizing the patterns. I think that's the problem with Bullet. Really good players, even in Bullet, they are able to recognize what they're doing wrong. But usually we need a slower time control to recognize. But it's an amazing and Crazy House to watch two top Crazy House players. It was Jan Lee against Master Tan, and Jan Lee was trying out this new variation, and he kept on. Master Tan kept on struggling and struggling. But by the end of a 30-game series, it was amazing to see that in his games as white, Master Tan was playing exactly the line that the engine, at least the first two moves that the engine was recommending as the best move, against this novelty that Jan was trialing out. So that's the mark of a great player, to be able to figure that out. Really, in the Bullets context, that's really hard. Okay, so what does Botvinnik have up his sleeve after King d1? Because we've just saw that what had been played before was knight b to c6, knight here, takes here, and bishop to g4. And apparently white is very happy in this situation because knight takes knight doesn't work, because some very subtle line, bishop b5 check, the king moves, we're able to get rid of our bishop with tempo and then take back the knight. Because if this, we just checkmate on the spot. That would be a funny end to a World Championship match. But Botvinnik didn't play knight c6. So remember, we're still in home prep. He had another move up his sleeve. So what did he play? Bishop d7. Interesting. A very artful move. Black intends to use the bishop's help along with the queen's striking power to underscore the vulnerability of the white king. The pieces have to be developed in any event, but it is best to first move the bishop out. So why not the knight? Why the bishop? So just for fun, let's just turn on Stockfish in this position. So knight c6 was the move that had been played before, and bishop d7 is the move played in this game. And Stockfish basically likes both. That's just to see it for fun. So bishop to d7. If white now plays knight f3, the natural, move developing the knight. Then after bishop to a4, oof, yeah, this is looking scary because the queen is cut off from defending c2. So bishop to d3, so at least we need to keep c2 covered. Queen takes c3, his position immediately becomes critical. So we're already in dire straits, is what he's saying. And I can't see a knockout blow, but it doesn't look pleasant. Like, where's this rook going? So knight f3 is not good enough. And if he plays knight e2, well, bishop a4 still comes. And the annoying threat is d3. Whew. It is easy to see how the move bishop d7 kills two birds with one stone. Strategically, it helps complete development and prepares for castling long, while tactically it readies a blow at c2. So bishop d7 is all about c2. Coming in and pushing this pawn. If white does not want to come under strong attack, he must play extremely actively. There is basis for this. With his move f5, this one here, f5, black eliminated his f4 pawn that was on f7, for which the black king often has to play the unpleasant role of guardian. But what does he mean by that? But I mean, I think he's just saying this pawn. Okay. On the other hand, the h5 to e8 diagonal has been weakened. h5 to e8. Yeah, this whole because of this missing f7 pawn, this diagonal is weaker. Okay, yes. And this diagonal protects the black king when the f pawn is in its original position. Moreover, it has deprived black's pieces of any future structural support on the diagonal. Yeah, so he's saying you can never put a piece, for example, on g6, because there's no pawn on f7. In any event, the white queen can now return to home shores with a tempo. Okay, so I understand kind of what he's saying. He's saying, yeah, black has caused a lot of trouble. White has caused... so black is causing a lot of trouble on the queen side, but because of this f5 move, there is structural weakness on this side of the board. And so Tal's going to exploit that to actually do some defending for a while. Queen h5 check. Knight g6 was played, and he just briefly mentions there's another move, king to d8. On king d8, to avoid the pin, I intended to continue bishop g5. Bishop to g5. I'm going to get to your comment in a second. Just let's follow this line of thought. Going for an attack. With the text move, black sends up a trial balloon. Will white be satisfied with the draw after queen r? With the text move, with knight g6. Okay, I see. Okay, I'm going to come to that in a second. Okay, yes, okay, I got it. So if king d8, basically bishop to g5 is a problem because it creates a pin here. That knight is not defended, I guess. Has this ever been played? I guess black would have to play something like knight to c6, defending the knight, and etc. Okay, now Pragmax has a very interesting point in the comments. he wants to play a4 to stop bishop a4. So a4 to stop bishop a4. So the problem is I'm worried this rook is going to be hit, because remember queen takes c3 could come and hit this rook. So the thing I'm just slightly concerned with a4 is where would that rook go? See, we could, I could just turn on the engine, but what I'm worried about, okay, just analyzing myself, I'd think this, then this, because you can't go to b1 or bishop takes a4 comes. And then, how do you defend a4? This is what I'm slightly concerned about. Like, even queen here, hitting a4. Okay, so let's just have a look. So it's not losing on the spot. I was thinking queen takes c3, but apparently that's Stockfish is suggesting just calmly developing. Oh, of course, queen takes c3, rook to a3 hits the queen. So that will work. Queen to a5. Yeah. So, yeah, rook a3. Okay, so a4 is not seems quite playable, but, and yeah, basically White's position looks a bit precarious, but Stockfish kind of still likes White's position. D takes c3 apparently is nasty, yeah. So what he plays instead is this, sort of exploiting the fact that there's no pawn on f7, knight g6, and what Tal says in the comments is that implicitly black is offering a draw here, because white could always return the queen here and return the knight here. Because when you attack the rook can't move, and so this would be... So this is offering a draw by repetition. But Tal is not one for taking draws, and instead he plays knight e2. And he has a pin on his mind. He wants to go to f4 and put pressure on this g6 knight. So let's see what Tal says. One must understand that such an agreement to a draw would be a considerable creative defeat. It would mean that I admitted that I was wallowing in a mire of confusion after the first innovation by my opponent. White's 13th move attempts to take advantage of the pin, so knight e2. It threatens knight f4, and on king f7, the quiet bishop d3 could follow. So knight f4, after king f7 defending the knight, bishop d3 could follow, or the sharper g4. So these are ideas in the position. Now black must take care of his king. Botvinnik spent more than half an hour deliberating over this position, from which it can be inferred that he had not covered all the subtleties of the variation in his home laboratory. And now Tal goes on to give a few possibilities, and you can actually see this new feature in Lichess Studies where it actually shows you the possibilities. So the move he plays in the game, a very good move, it turns out, is d3. But let's look at 12. King. Oh, so Risai says he did play king d8 in a later match. That's very interesting. Instead of pinning his own knight, going for king d8, bishop out. Interesting. So notice this nice Lichess feature where it actually gives you all the possible moves that are in the study in nice little boxes. Quite nice. So queen takes e5 is one of them. So if queen takes e5, we go c takes d4, so we win back the pawn. Okay, so that seems, and we hit the queen with tempo, so that's good. If d takes c3, then we do this, the aforementioned line, knight f4, king f7, king f7, and at this point he's tempted by queen h7 check, but the problem with queen h7 check, there's rook g7. I'm losing this now. Oof. Let's just follow what he says. No, actually, I'm quite interested. So why not queen h7 here? So he says bishop d3 is a lot better than queen h7. And I'm not quite sure. So I'm going to turn on the engine. So rook g7? That's what I thought. Does rook g7 just kick the queen away? Yeah. Okay. So that's why not queen h7. You don't really gain anything by doing that. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So you go bishop d3, but what do you gain by doing bishop d3? Let's see. What's the idea of bishop d3? Okay, so knight to c6. So he's going to go ballistic in a second. Bishop takes f5. E takes f5. e6. Bishop takes... Oh my goodness. Oh, now I see it. Okay. Then queen h7. And the king has to stay... If the king moves, this is an x-ray on the queen. But if you do this... Okay, anyone in chat see it? White to play. And I'll just recap how we got here. So we got here from, if the simple knight c6, we go bang, bang, check, takes. That suddenly opens up this line. Queen there checks. If the king moves, we win his queen. And yeah, I think you guys have got it in chat, Pragmax and Rusai. You just take that rook, and you're winning a free queen. Yeah, talking about complications. And boom. Wow. So simple knight c6 is no good. Okay, this is a serious threat. Bishop takes f5. Okay. So yeah, what does black do here? Apparently queen takes e5 is basically queen takes e5 is the only move here to stay in the game. Queen takes e5 and then g4. Okay, I see. So you've got a huge attack brewing. It's nasty stuff, but all white's pieces are holding, and you're just trying to. Interesting. So queen takes e5, g4, and that's actually still interesting. So that is a possible move actually. D takes c3. Okay, what's next? Next is bishop a4, which was the original idea of that bishop move. But that runs into knight f4, queen takes c3, bishop d3 just to cover, because bishop takes here is almost mating. Queen takes a1. Okay, so we lose our rook. Knight takes g6. Knight c6. And just back off. Knight f4 check. And the other move he was considering was knight e7 check as well. And what's the idea of that? But the idea of knight e7, he says knight e7 check, black should go to d7. And then you take the rook. Okay, and now I'm very confused. So why can't the white king take this knight? Because queen here check and you win the rook, or do you? King could go here though. King f8. Oof, I mean, okay, I see there's king e2 and the threat of this. It's all rather complicated. So you can't, so you can't quite take. So king d7 avoids that. King e7 is queen h7 check. King f8 protects the rook, and you'd love to play bishop h6 check, but your king's the bishop's pinned. So it's not obvious, but you still, so it's all a long variation, but yeah. But the idea is move this king here, bishop here. If I just turn the engine on, so king e2, f4, bishop takes f4, queen takes h1, bishop h6. So it's like you're losing all your pieces for a gigantic attack. We're seeing, and you're winning this rook eventually. So yeah, +2 says the engine. So that's why that knight can't be taken. Okay, so that's what he was contemplating in the game: this check and take the rook. But he says actually this knight here check is much stronger, with many of the same ideas. Because then if the king ever goes to f8, notice we have knight takes e6 ideas. He recently says king e2 is really nice, yeah, quite scary stuff. So, okay, so there are lots of, this position has suddenly got very interesting. Now, what else could black do after knight e2? Bishop a4, and the final thing you could do is knight c6, in which case you just go c takes d4, rook c8, and rook a2, and apparently this is a kind of more like boring line. So the thing with knight c6 is, that's an example of a move you're not threatening. If black doesn't threaten anything, white is able to consolidate his position, and all is fine. So I think that's kind of instructive. If black does a nothing move, then so at least this is an interesting move. So knight e2. So knight e2. Now black has to do something interesting. If black just does knight here, we're just going to take back this pawn, and somehow it's black's king in danger, and yeah, rook c8, rook a2. Everything's apparently consolidated. If you do it in the engine, plus it goes +1, +2. It's all nice. Okay, but Botvinnik, so as I said, he thought for half an hour and he played the best move into position. Stockfish doesn't see it at depth 16, doesn't see it at depth 17, doesn't see it at depth 18, because I've done something wrong. It's not knight c6. And it does see it at depth 21. Well, it likes bishop b5, interestingly, which we didn't discuss at all. But a really good move, d3. So what's the idea of d3? White's answer, Tal says, is forced. Yeah, Pragmatic says this is so interesting. I need to take a shot. It's really nice. Keep up the stream. Yeah, I'll put everything. I'll put everything up on YouTube. So I'll just share quickly the YouTube link so you can come back later, and yeah, hopefully I'll be on YouTube later. D3. But usually I stream Crazy House, but I want to do more endgames and more stuff like this as well. So why is the answer forced? Because if takes, bishop here, check, it looks uncomfortable, certainly. But so if we did a move like knight f4, Now, if I just turn the engine off a second, if knight f4 takes, bishop a4 check, I have to say it does look uncomfortable. Bishop a4 check, king here. What's black's big idea here? d4. Whew. And probably eventually bring rooks into the center. Okay, so everything is kind of collapsing. And apparently the best maybe is to go king b1. King b1 and bishop b2 is white's best defense, but he's groveling. So yes, he has to take. Okay. And the next question is, how can he take? Well, the knight's back on e2, so he has to take with the pawn. So that's why Tal doesn't say very much. He just says, gotta take it. Bishop a4 check. However strange it may seem, this natural move does not seem to be quite correct. Black takes advantage of the opportunity to break the pin on the king side with tempo. But in so doing, he drives the white king to e1, where it is considerably more secure. Okay, so I guess he wants to bring his queen over to the king side. That's his reason for saying that. Yes. White's problems would have been much more complicated after the simple knight c6, so Tal was a little bit afraid of knight c6 here. Followed by castling long, just simply castling. The white king, whose protection on the queen side was quite unreliable, would have had to waste a tempo to get over to the other flank via e1. I think that after knight c6, black would have had some real compensation for his two sacrificed pawns. And just to cheat a little bit, why after knight c6, why couldn't we go something like knight f4? That was our original plan. Oh, of course, this knight can take here and defend against the pin. Okay, so after knight c6, we could. Oh, this is terrible. It's not being very responsive. Knight c6, then d4, and then castles queenside. So that's the variation that he was considering. And yeah, Stockfish likes white because white's got extra material, but the white king is a little bit awkward, is what he's saying. Having said that, the structure is conserved. So I can understand bishop a4 just to develop that bishop into a much more active square, followed by maybe knight c6 later. And Botvinnik went queen takes e5. This is a fully understandable attempt by black to regain some of his sacrificed material. But the text move loses a lot of time. And again, Tal really likes just simply knight c6. Knight c6 and get castled. Having said that, if you do that, white gets to consolidate his structure. So I'm not sure. But he's probably got a point. Yeah. So Stockfish really likes knight c6 here. Okay. Or it likes a very weird move, which is d4. If you let it run. Yeah, it likes d4. It likes just, let's sacrifice a few more pawns, is what it's saying. Or else knight c6. Yeah, knight c6, only +1. Okay, but Botvinnik goes pawn grabbing. Now it is true this move is not as might have been more in the. So it says knight c6 might have been more in the spirit of black's plan. Now it is true this move is not as strong, since white can continue f4, castles queenside, bishop d2, gradually freeing the pieces on his king side. Sooner or later black will have to sacrifice a knight on e5. So he's thinking about bishop here check, king e1, knight c6. He's thinking of f4, okay. f4, okay. Castles queenside, bishop to d2. And he's thinking there'll be a sacrifice on e5. It's difficult to anticipate future events, but in any case, black might have the initiative. It is tempting to look at the continuation suggested by the checkmaster Podgorny. And Podgorny looked at bishop b5, so another move. But he's saying this move doesn't work because of bishop g5 in response. Bishop takes d3, king d2, and he says white seizes the initiative. So the king defends c3, the rook comes in, he's thinking the knight will come in here, but isn't that e4? Yeah, that's pawn not. So king d2, the king is an active piece. So yeah, he likes white here. Okay, so but what actually happened in the game? King e1, queen takes, bishop to g5. The basic problem which now confronts white is how to keep the black king in the center. So he's trying to stop black from castling queenside. In this respect, the loss of white's e-pawn has played into white's hands, since new threats can be created with the opening of the e-file. White's plan is carried out by the unusual lateral development of the rook. So Tal is seeing quite a way ahead in this position. He's imagining a rook lift. And so what does he play? Bishop to g5, knight to c6. He's saying the attempt to fight for initiative with f4 does not work in view of d4. Queen to f5. Well, let's play it. f4, he says, does not work because of d4. Queen to f5. Knight takes f4. Queen to c2. Bishop to d3. And at that point, I'm concerned. Is that right? Knight takes f4, queen c2. Yeah, that bishop takes bishop d3 is wrong. Bishop d3 is clearly wrong. What's going? Oh no, bishop d3 is right. Okay, bishop d3. So we should continue this line. Queen takes c3, king to e2. Okay, so then the rooks are connected, and I'm slightly nervous, but apparently white is crashing here. Yeah, this is a problem. 3 pieces now piling up on the pin. Wow, okay, so just backing up a second, how did we get here? So he's saying f4 does not work. So f4, seemingly innocuous. Trying to push through. Doesn't work because you just open up. You open up this file, you connect your rooks, and yeah, white is crashing. So instead, knight c6, and get rid of those. d4 comes anyway, queen c7. So black won a pawn, but lost a lot of time in doing so. And he also says, take care after queen e4, rook c1, and white is doing very well. Black's queen finds it does not have much room in the center of the board. The transition to the endgame so the other move he might have played is to just let's go to an endgame, queen h8, is also not satisfactory for black, and again it's because white has this dangerous h-pawn once queens are off the board. So white is trying to make it so that both sides have queens on the board. White is trying to make it so that it's the black king that's unsafe, even though we saw earlier in the game it looks like white's king is the one skirting in dangerous waters. Let's take out that f4 move. Knight c6, d4, queen to c7, which looks like quite a good move. It's controlling the seventh rank. Okay, and now we see another. If I could work out how highlights work, this would be another tagged position, h4. Another sort of highlight in this game. So the previous highlight was going king to d1 in the first place, but that was still, it had been played before, so it was still theory. King to d1. So h4, h4, and his plan is a rook lift, I believe. This was not played to begin the advance of the passed pawn, although it will play its part, but to bring white closer to his goal of getting the king's rook into the game and nearer the pressing developments in the centre. On more sluggish continuations, black, by playing knight c to e7, inasmuch as white simply exchanges on e7, bishop takes, queen takes, and continues queen g5, and carries the game into extremely prosaic channels. So he's thinking endgame ideas. Therefore, black is forced to meet him halfway, opening lines. Oh, sorry, not this queen. Knight here, you're forced to exchange, and then the black queen comes to g5. Is that what he's trying to say? No, he's saying white goes queen g5. Okay, I mean, I'm not quite sure how he goes queen g5 because there's no h4 yet. Therefore, black is forced to meet him halfway, opening lines. Okay, so I think more to the point, it's that in this position, white still hasn't connected his rooks. He's got serious development issues. He only has 1, 2, potentially 3 active pieces. This is coming into the game. Fourth one is coming eventually. The rooks are not coming to the game anytime soon. White can't castle to bring the rooks into the game, and therefore h4. And black plays e5, which is interesting, given what we said about opening up the e-file, opening up the center, because black's king is in the center. So who is this going to benefit? Rook h3, bringing up the reserves and simultaneously countering the threat of e takes d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. So what will white play here? So knight takes d4, so, oh yes, so the point is, this is a threat, and knight here is a threat. So I'm guessing rook c3 would be played. No. Oof, hang on, what? So rook c3 is countering against e takes d4, c takes d4. Okay, so just as a test, if we just did a nothing move, and you want c takes d4, takes, e takes d4, what does he mean by knight takes d4? Ah, knight takes d4. And the idea being, if you take this knight, yeah, obviously if you take this knight, queen c3 check's an issue, and if you don't take this knight, then knight here check is an issue. So by playing this, so it's a rather interesting threat. Takes, eek. Why is it doing this to me? Takes, we're defending against queen c3, so we can take this knight if we want to. We want to. So c3 is defended, so it's all about defending c3, that's what he's trying to say. So this is a double defender on c3, it's reinforcing c3. Hi there, obese brain. So how do we continue? Queen to f7. So he defends the pin. Also possible here was e4. So he was thinking in the previous position. e4 was also interesting, just blocking out the center. And also not cutting off squares as well. I mean, I'd be very tempted by e4 for the simple reason that it cuts off squares that the rook might have wanted to use. But maybe the rook is going to other squares, like to g3. But anyway, he instead goes for queen to f7. So he said black could have gone e4. In that case, black's position would be rather solid, but he would be threatening absolutely nothing, and white could go about realizing his pawn advantage without any hindrance. Bad would be f4. So we're saying this is interesting. He's saying bad would be f4. Queen to g4. Oof. All of black's efforts are being directed to driving the queen back from h5 by bringing his rook to h8, but he is never quite able to do this. So not quite sure I follow entirely, but I think the point is he had f4. Stockbridge quite actually likes f4. No, it doesn't. It likes queen f7, which is the move played. Yeah, e4 is very interesting, but it's just the +2. White just has a 2-pawn advantage, and black needs counterplay. So that's why black goes for queen f7. d4 takes e5. Knight takes e5. And it's just interesting, why couldn't black play rook h8? Almost trapping the queen. So what's the why couldn't the queen go to f3? And then knight takes e5. That would be annoying. But the problem is after rook h8, there is e6. If rook takes queen, you take this queen, and I think white's dissolved his problems. So he just takes. Then rook e3. And if black takes this queen, you take this queen, that's fine. But also, if queen takes rook, queen takes rook. So there's going to be some exchange. Rook takes queen is apparently the line given. King f7. And then the very nice move here is just take this knight. So if it takes back, I'm assuming he wants this. And what's amazing about this move is you're not just winning an exchange, you're actually winning a full rook. So just to back off a bit, rook h3. And Risai says Tal played computeresque style in this game. Well, he played the best moves without fear, if that's what computeresque is. Queen f7, d takes e5, knight c6 takes e5, and rook e3. Okay. king to d7 gets the king out of the pin. Yeah, sorry, no, not playing. And anyway, I'd normally play Crazy House if I were playing, but I can't even get rid of the challenge. Okay, rook to e3, king to d7. So this is game 1 of the World Championship match between Tal and Botvinnik. If anyone is just joining us, I will just do a quick review soon, but we're nearing critical points of this game. Rook e3, king d7, and it again says you can't go for this because of this, and if knight takes rook, then queen takes queen. And another line he gives is if rook h8, this, and you move the king out the way, then you have rook e7 check. Queen takes e7, queen takes g6. Oof. So you've won 2 pieces for your rook. So again, rook h8. So he's basically saying black wants to play rook h8 and just can't do it. So king d7, and again, he's probably hoping for rook h8, but now rook b1, and there's another threat. With this unusual maneuver, white brings his queen's rook into the game. At the same time, black's b-pawn is attacked. Okay, b6. So black is keeping on having to ward off these attacks. It is difficult to imagine how, with the queen on h5, the weakening of a6 can play any role. But nevertheless it does. White's problem would have been more complicated after bishop c6. So he's saying black should have backed off like so. The bishop, and this is an interesting philosophy, the bishop's work is done here, and it can just back off, play a defensive role. But after this move, I intended to sacrifice the exchange, transposing into a rather advantageous endgame. Okay, so he had grand plans after bishop c6, which might be worth having a look at. Knight d4, f4, oof, hitting the rook. And he wanted to sacrifice the exchange on e5, swap off queens, and win a third pawn, rook a to e8 check, king d2. But this would have been the lesser of 2 evils for black. The move b6 has another drawback. White can take advantage of the position of the bishop on a4, winning an important tempo for the development of the rook. That's another interesting point he makes. So Tal was saying he was happy to go for this position with 3 connected passed pawns, but an exchange down. But after bishop c6. But after b6, he's intending to activate the rook, I imagine. So first knight f4. White's pieces are poised like a coiled mainspring. If black now plays rook h8, then after knight takes g6, and the threat, by the way, after knight takes g6 is knight takes here and take the queen. Knight takes g6 back, so I should just play it. If rook h8, knight takes g6, he has to take back because otherwise you've got this fork here. So knight takes g6. Queen e2, and he's saying now we can come in, infiltrate on a6. He says that infiltration will decide the game because you're hitting the bishop with tempo and then you're coming in. Oof. And the rook is really powerful. This rook is actually protecting the white king and while attacking the black king, so you can really see how powerful this position is for white. It's really beautiful. So rook h8 isn't possible, so he brings his own rook into the game. Rook b4, exclamation mark, hitting the bishop with tempo. The bishop backs off, and now queen to d1. And this is the position when I open the stream. I'd say this is maybe the third of the if we could do highlights, this would be the third. I don't know how to add like a highlight. If anyone in chat can teach me if there is a way of doing it. If I type something like, highlight in as a tag, there's no OK button, is there? Go enter. Doesn't really work, does it? So if someone can teach me that at some point, that would be cool. But queen to d1, definitely very interesting. And Tal describes it as follows. The queen has done her job. She is now dismissed. So the queen has basically wrecked black's kingside, now backs off, so it's performing a defensive role, also potentially an attacking role, sorry, kingside, but potentially an attacking role now on the queen side or in the centre. And again, just looking at the pawn count, white is one pawn up, and particularly this is a passed pawn. Black never played rook h8. Oof. A rather picturesque position has arisen. The white king and queen, after their long journeys, have returned to their original positions. The king's bishop has not made even one move. Stuck on f1. And nevertheless, black has a very difficult position on his hands. White not only has a solid extra pawn, but he also has extraordinarily actively placed pieces, particularly the rooks, which are effectively controlling the centre. The impressive mass of black's pieces in this region is, in fact, harmless. So black's got 3 minors all over the centre, but the rooks are doing a great job. Knight g6 takes f4 came, and he was saying this move doesn't work. So yeah, that would be quite a natural idea to go knight g4, because this rook, I said, is a wonderful defender. If you ever took this rook, that rook's coming back, that would be the biggest mistake of your life, because then suddenly white would be under the cosh. But after knight g4, simply rook e2. Oh, he says you can just exchange rooks and it's fine. I'm shocked. Apparently rook takes e8. Rook e2 works, and apparently rook takes e8, rook takes e8 is just completely fine. That's so shocking, because then you're giving black the file. Bishop e2. And your plan is just to get your king out of the way. So I was thinking that would be bad for white, but no, apparently not. So knight g4 looks good, but it doesn't really work. So knight takes, bishop takes, no, rook takes, okay. Rook takes, knight g6, hitting the rook, and rook to d4. Swaps off the central rook, rook takes e3, and he's saying you can't play f4, even though that might look tempting, because of queen to g4. And I guess the idea is bishop takes f4 next with check, for example. If he goes here, and yeah. So rook takes rook, so that seems sensible. Pawn takes. There's no need to withdraw the bishop from its active position on g5. So Tal really liked his bishop outpost. The white e-pawn can serve as a shield for the king if need be. However, black does not succeed in creating any threats whatsoever. King c7, so the black king trying to find some shelter. c4. This leads to a forced material advantage for white. On knight e7, so if knight e7, white continues c takes d5, bishop takes d5, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, queen c1 check, defending his e3 pawn. And if he takes with the knight, he has another very nice move, which is bishop to c4. Whoa, 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 bishop c4. Yeah, which is nasty. So he has to take with the bishop, they take here and queen there. And so he's saying this is just a solid pawn up in the endgame. And black has no chances. So instead he took the pawn, d5 takes c4, bishop takes c4, queen to g7. Bishop takes rook. Not a bad course of events for the bishop, which had just made its first entrance into the game. Queen takes rook, and h5. The pass-pawn has its say. Black resigned. So that was the story of game 1 of Tal-Botvinnik 1960. As I said at the beginning of the stream, I was motivated to start reading this book because of Yasser Serouan saying it was mentioning it as the one book people should read. It is top of his recommendation list. For those who missed the beginning of the stream, let's just play through the game again from the beginning. And okay, no harm in having the engine on as we go. And Ryosei says, what I meant is that at first glance his pieces seem to lack coordination, but somehow everything still works out, like in the games between computers. Yes. I think it was quite a success given he just walked into his opponent's prep and he wasn't afraid. He just he played probably a rare move in King d1, and then he continued playing, quite beautifully actually. Okay, so I'm just going to slowly play through the game. So we saw it was a winnower. Queen c7 first, rather than the usual knight e7 then castles. Queen g4, f5. And Ryosei says, have you read Kasparov's My Great Predecessors, Volume 2? Sadly, I read a lot as a kid, and that would have been published much more recently than when I used to read a lot. And having said I read a lot, I've completely forgotten everything I read. So I'm just beginning again here. And my focus has probably more been on Crazy House. Wouldn't it be wonderful if Crazy House had this kind of literature as well? So I don't know. In a dream world, I would create some literature for Crazy House, but I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen because it would be maybe too much of a time commitment. Okay, so c takes d4. Lots of queen takes c3 check, winning the rook, and king d1. Okay, so this would be like my first highlight of the game. King d1, very interesting. As people said in the chat, d takes c3 was quite interesting. Bishop d7. So the idea is to target c2, and black just backs off with the queen and starts creating threats. Okay, the king actually is quite safe there, and actually the queen on e5 can be hit with tempo, so it's not maybe as good as going knight c6 and allowing white to consolidate his center and castling queenside. So yeah, Botvinnik has been caught with his king in the center of the board, which is something that happens to me as an amateur of the game. So it's quite embarrassing in a way. e5, rook h3, but quite beautiful now how he continues. Takes that pawn, black takes back, and centralizes his pieces. Full of threats. Okay. Hits the bishop. So yeah, now it's just consolidation. Queen d1 is saying, I've done my job, and now I just need to consolidate. e3 pawn is his blocker, and he's just trading down. And push, and black resigns. So what were my highlights of the game? Probably, yeah, queen g4, he says there's nothing new under the sun. I didn't even mention that in the stream, but of course he's saying it's a very common theme in the French defense, this queen g4 move. So I'd say my king d1 is not a move that would come to my mind. So I'd say king d1 is the first highlight of the game for me. Yeah, I mean, this queen h4 move was pretty nifty. And now h4 in this position, developing the rook laterally, heading for e3, and also providing a second defender of c3. I think that's very interesting. Rook h3, very nice. And I'd say the third highlight of the game was the queen d1 move. I'd probably also say one of the variation was a highlight with queen takes g7. That was a highlight as well. Why d takes c3 in this line, knight here, king here. The fact bishop to d3 first, because if queen h7, just rook g7. Knight c6. Yeah, this whole idea, which he had up his sleeve during the game. Bishop takes f5. Just close that down. So bishop d3, knight c6, bishop takes f5. This takes queen here, pinning the king to the queen, so it must be blocked, and then just sacrificing to win the queen. To win the queen back. So you lose your own queen, but you win lots of pieces along the way. Yeah, I thought that was very beautiful. So bishop, and that came if, so after, yeah, d3. d3 came instead of d takes c3. So maybe this was the highlight of the game from black, this d3 move. Yeah, that was quite a nice move from black. Created some, but he tries to get his pawn back, and then, yeah, h4 is the second highlight from Tal, and I'd say the third highlight from this game. Yeah, it's a nice development of all his pieces. Is then bringing his queen back to d1, and then it's just consolidate. And yeah, you can see that the Stockfish evaluation is just going up and up. But that's just there in case people want to see other ideas. Okay, so hopefully another day we'll look at game 2. This stream was actually on day 1. I planned it about a year ago, but I just never got around to doing it. And this game is quite interesting because, yeah, I think in the next game as Black, Botvinnik didn't return to the French defence, so he was sufficiently. Although Risai said that he did play it later with a different move. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching. I hope this has been fun. This has been something different. My main interest is Crazy House, but I do have a strong belief that Crazy House is fundamentally chess. So I'm a great believer in chess as well. And the other thing I'd like to do at some point is more endgame streams, but we'll see. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching, and thanks especially Risai 8000 who's been here since the start, and Pragmax who joined for the first half but had to leave. Thanks everyone else, also everyone. See you next time.